The allegations Meghan has made are simply not true. Her account does not reflect what actually happened, and it has led the public to a deeply misleading impression. That version of events has no basis in...
The message reached William without warning, and within minutes the atmosphere around him changed completely. Meghan had made a direct attempt to secure access to Diana's private trust, insisting that her connection to Harry gave her a legitimate place in decisions surrounding the late princess's protected legacy. William did not hesitate. His response was immediate, personal, and furious, and everyone present understood that this was no ordinary disagreement. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. William read the central paragraph twice before saying anything. Diana's private trust, a protected arrangement designed to keep selected personal assets, correspondence, jewelry interests, and family provisions under controlled management, carried a meaning far beyond money. It represented one of the few parts of his mother's legacy that remained outside ordinary palace battles. Meghan's formal demand was specific. She wanted access and a consultative role through Harry's position as Diana's younger son. To the prince, that crossed a boundary he believed had been deliberately protected for years. The future king pushed the folder away and looked directly at the senior advisor sitting opposite him. His anger was not loud, but that made it heavier. Diana's legacy will not become a bargaining tool, he said. The advisor did not argue. Instead, he carefully explained that Meghan's request went further than simply asking questions. She wanted involvement in future decisions affecting protected family items, including material connected directly to the late princess. That distinction changed everything. William closed the folder with both hands and answered, "No one forces their way into something my mother deliberately protected." Harry immediately became the emotional fault line in the dispute. He loved his wife, yet he also knew exactly what Diana meant to his brother. The Duke understood that any battle involving their mother could reopen wounds neither man had ever truly escaped. His position mattered because the application relied heavily on his connection to Diana, making him more than a bystander. Meghan could push the argument forward, but Harry's name gave that argument its emotional and practical weight. Then, another detail unsettled William. The trust administrator revealed through a documented briefing that the application had been prepared with unusual precision. Whoever shaped it appeared to understand the internal rules well enough to identify where pressure might be applied. That realization cooled the prince's anger into something more dangerous: suspicion. William no longer wanted only to reject the request. He wanted to know who had studied the structure, who had guided Meghan, and why they believed this was the moment to challenge it. Before anyone outside that room heard a word, he ordered a private review. But William's anger was only the surface. Beneath it stood three people carrying three very different versions of Diana's memory, and those versions were about to collide. For William, Diana is not a royal symbol. She is his mother. For Harry, she remains the emotional center of wounds that never fully healed. And for Meghan, Diana's story has become inseparable from the way Harry understands family, loyalty, protection, and betrayal. That is why this dispute cuts deeper than money, jewels, or legal language. It touches grief, and grief inside a fractured family rarely stays rational for long. William carried that grief differently from his brother. He believed some parts of Diana's private life had to remain protected, not because they belonged to the monarchy, but because they belonged to her. The private trust, a legal arrangement created to hold and manage protected assets for chosen beneficiaries, represented that boundary. Harry saw the same legacy through another lens. To him, both sons should retain equal moral weight whenever their mother's name was involved, because neither title nor distance could change the fact that they had lost her together. The prince remembered earlier family discussions about keeping Diana's belongings away from future conflict. Those conversations had stayed with him, and now Meghan's demand felt less like a technical request and more like an intrusion into something deeply personal. Harry understood exactly why his brother would react that way. He also understood why his wife refused to accept permanent distance from anything connected to Diana. That left him trapped between two people who both believed they were protecting something important. Harry finally said what he had been avoiding. After a tense private conversation with Meghan, he rubbed his forehead and admitted, "If this becomes about Mum, William will never back down." She did not retreat. Meghan answered that staying silent would only confirm that they could be excluded whenever the family chose. To her, this was about access and respect. To him, it was becoming a direct collision with years of unresolved pain. Then, a confidential note changed the shape of the argument. A documented account showed that Harry had previously asked broad questions about Diana's trust, but he had stopped short of demanding direct influence. That detail mattered. Meghan's new move had crossed a line he himself had once avoided, raising a difficult possibility. This challenge may have begun with her determination rather than his. William started reviewing older exchanges almost immediately. He wanted to know when curiosity had turned into strategy, and why the pressure had surfaced now. One earlier conversation stood out more than the rest, and buried behind the present confrontation was one earlier moment, small at first, almost forgettable, that had quietly pushed everything toward collision. Months before the furious demand landed in William's hands, another meeting had already changed the direction of the conflict. It happened privately, without cameras, and without any formal announcement. Meghan asked a seemingly simple question about Diana's personal legacy. The answer she received was polite, but absolute. From that moment onward, according to the fictional timeline of this story, the dispute stopped being theoretical and became deeply personal. Meghan had already shown a growing interest in how Diana's private belongings were handled, and who had the power to make decisions about them. Palace advisors had explained that some material connected to the late princess was publicly associated with the royal family, while a smaller private trust operated under separate rules. That trust was a protected legal arrangement, controlling selected assets and family material for named beneficiaries. The difference mattered because access was not based on public status, marriage, or royal visibility. It depended on the terms already written into the arrangement. The turning point came during a private family meeting at Windsor. Meghan asked William whether she and Harry could one day take part in decisions involving Diana's protected trust. The prince answered carefully that participation was limited to people already designated under its governing terms. She heard exclusion. He believed he was defending a boundary that had existed long before she entered the family. The tension sharpened instantly, because both sides believed they were arguing from principle, not ambition. Harry made the moment worse by saying almost nothing. Meghan waited for him to challenge the answer, but he remained restrained, leaving her feeling exposed. William interpreted that silence differently. To him, his brother's lack of protest suggested understanding. Then Meghan asked whether the arrangement itself could ever be changed. The future king rose from the table, paused with one hand against the chair, and replied, "Some things were designed to stay outside family politics." That sentence stayed with her. After the meeting, Meghan privately requested information about whether the trust rules could be challenged or broadened through an existing beneficiary. A documented account of that inquiry later showed that she was not simply asking out of curiosity. A legal researcher eventually identified a narrow procedural path through Harry, one that could be used to request greater involvement without giving her direct standing on her own. William would later discover that this Windsor exchange had not merely upset Meghan. It had triggered the strategy that eventually became the formal demand on his desk. What he had believed was a closed conversation had quietly become the starting point of a challenge. And once the prince understood that connection, polite distance was finished. The next time William and Meghan discussed Diana's trust, neither of them would pretend this was only about rules. The confrontation did not begin with shouting. That made it more dangerous. William entered already furious. Meghan entered determined not to retreat, and Harry knew within seconds that neither side had come to compromise. Diana's name sat between them like an invisible fourth presence. Then Meghan defended her request as a matter of fairness, and William's restraint finally cracked. William had called the meeting before giving any formal answer to the trust demand. He wanted the argument contained, direct, and impossible to misunderstand. Harry had to be there because the request depended on his relationship to Diana, making his role central rather than symbolic. The trust review, a formal process used to examine whether protected decisions can be reconsidered under existing rules, had suddenly become the heart of the dispute. What looked like procedure on paper felt intensely personal in that room. Meghan spoke first. She argued that Harry could not be treated as Diana's son when the family wanted emotional loyalty, yet be pushed aside when decisions about her private legacy became difficult. Her voice remained controlled, but the accusation landed hard. William answered that his brother's place had never been questioned. What he rejected was the idea that marriage automatically gave someone else authority over everything connected to their mother. The prince believed that distinction was essential. Meghan believed it was exactly how exclusion was being justified. Harry shifted as the tension deepened. He could hear both sides using Diana to defend opposite positions, and that was the part he feared most. Meghan leaned forward and said, Harry should not need permission to protect his own mother's legacy. William stood, placed his hand flat on the table, and answered, protecting her is exactly why this stops here. The silence afterward was sharper than the argument itself. Then Meghan introduced the detail that changed the meeting. Through a documented legal consultation, she had been advised that Harry might possess a procedural right to request a review of certain trust decisions. William did not react immediately. Instead, he reached for an older written acknowledgement and placed it in front of his brother. The document showed that Harry had previously accepted the trust's existing limitations and had not challenged its structure at the time. Harry stared at the wording longer than anyone expected. Meghan looked toward him, waiting for an answer, while William remained still. The problem was suddenly clear. Continuing the challenge might mean contradicting a position Harry himself had already endorsed. William had drawn the emotional boundary, but that was no longer enough. The next decision would come from the rules themselves, and those rules were about to reveal who truly held the power. Behind the anger sat a colder reality. William could object, Meghan could demand, and Harry could protest, but none of them possessed unlimited power. Diana's private trust had been designed precisely to prevent emotional pressure from deciding its future. Now the administrators responsible for protecting it had to determine whether Meghan's attempt carried any legitimate weight at all. William understood that the decision would not belong to him alone. The trust was overseen by independent administrators, meaning people appointed to manage protected assets according to fixed rules rather than family pressure. Designated beneficiaries could receive information and certain rights, but those rights were limited. That mattered because the prince's influence came from his assigned role and existing responsibilities, not simply from being the future king. Even his position could not override the structure. The prince found that harder to accept than he expected. He felt personally responsible for protecting Diana's memory, yet he now had to wait while other people decided what those protections actually allowed. Harry reacted very differently. To him, hearing his mother's legacy discussed through legal limits and technical definitions felt humiliating. He had spent years carrying her memory as something deeply emotional, and now that same memory was being reduced to clauses, access rights, and administrative boundaries. The answer finally came during a private briefing. William remained silent, while a trust advisor delivered the conclusion, in careful terms. Meghan had no independent standing to enter the arrangement or direct decisions simply because she was married to Harry. Marriage could not create authority that the trust had never granted. When those words were spoken, the prince did not smile or show satisfaction. He lowered his eyes and released a slow breath. Harry received the second part of the decision with far more conflict. As an eligible family beneficiary, he could request limited information and exercise rights already assigned to him. But those rights belonged to him personally. He could not transfer them to Meghan, and he could not use his position as a route to give her control over protected decisions. That distinction was final enough to destroy the strategy behind the original demand. William's lack of triumph exposed the truth beneath his fury. He had never wanted a victory over Harry or Meghan. He wanted to stop Diana's private legacy from becoming another battlefield where old family wounds were turned into weapons. Harry now faced the hardest choice of all. He could continue challenging the structure in his own name, risking another rupture with William, or he could separate himself from the demand his wife had made. The decision closed one door for Meghan, but it opened a far more painful one for Harry. For the first time since the confrontation began, Harry was no longer arguing about rules. He was confronting consequences. Meghan's attempt had failed, William had hardened his position, and the trust administrators had removed any realistic path toward the authority she wanted. What remained was something more personal. Harry had to decide whether defending the challenge was worth deepening a division tied directly to the memory of his mother. Harry received the decision privately before any wider palace discussion could begin. He was told that his own beneficiary rights, limited rights allowing a named person to receive certain information or benefits from a trust, would remain untouched despite Meghan's failed request. That mattered because the dispute had never erased his personal connection to Diana's protected legacy. It also mattered because he had feared William wanted something far harsher: complete separation. The Duke felt that fear clash with loyalty to his wife. Meghan remained frustrated, arguing that the decision proved how completely they could be kept outside important family matters. She believed the structure itself protected an old system of exclusion. Harry understood her anger, but he also understood something she could not feel in the same way. Every argument over Diana carried the weight of childhood grief, and every confrontation with William reopened a wound that had never fully closed. Then Harry reached the instruction that changed his mood completely. A documented account from the trust administrators showed that William had specifically asked them not to reduce his brother's existing rights because of Meghan's challenge. The prince had opposed her demand fiercely, yet he had also drawn a line around Harry's place as Diana's son. That contradiction unsettled the Duke more than another angry confrontation ever could. Harry placed the page down and sat motionless. His anger did not disappear, but it weakened. Confusion replaced certainty. If William truly wanted to remove him from Diana's legacy, why protect his position when he had the chance to punish him? That question forced the Duke to reconsider what he had assumed about his brother's motives. Meghan noticed the change almost immediately. She asked whether he was reconsidering their position, and Harry did not answer at first. When he finally spoke, his voice was quieter. He said he needed to speak to William alone. That decision shifted the entire conflict. No lawyers, no advisors, no trust administrators, no one to translate grief into procedure or loyalty into strategy. For the first time, the next move would belong not to palace machinery, but to Diana's two sons. There were no officials in the room, no lawyers interpreting language, and no spouses defending positions. Just William and Harry. For years, nearly every disagreement between them had grown larger because other pressures surrounded it. This time, stripped of those buffers, both men were forced back to the one truth neither could escape. Before titles, marriages, interviews, and palace divisions, they were Diana's sons. Harry had asked for the meeting after learning that William protected his existing rights, even while opposing Meghan's demand. The prince agreed, but only on one condition. The conversation would stay private and focus on Diana alone. That mattered because both brothers had spent years allowing wider family conflict to shape how they interpreted each other. It also mattered because the trust had become more than a legal arrangement. It had become a test of whether they could still separate grief from everything that had happened since. Harry spoke first. He admitted that William's refusal had felt like another attempt to push him away from their mother's legacy. The Duke had convinced himself that every boundary was another form of rejection. William listened without interrupting. Then he admitted something of his own. Meghan's request had frightened him because he saw Diana's private memory becoming another weapon in a conflict that had already damaged too much. The silence between them changed after that. Harry revealed through their private recorded conversation that Meghan had initiated the formal access request after the Windsor meeting left her feeling permanently excluded. She believed the refusal proved that no matter how closely she stood beside him, there would always be parts of the family close to her. Harry had supported the challenge because he did not want his wife to feel abandoned. William understood the loyalty, but he rejected the conclusion. William finally said what Harry had needed to hear much earlier. "You never needed to fight me to remain her son." The Duke lowered his eyes before answering, "Maybe I stopped believing you knew that." The prince did not defend himself. He simply explained that Harry's rights as Diana's son were different from Meghan claiming independent authority over the trust. To him, protecting that difference was not punishment. It was the boundary he had been trying to preserve from the beginning. Harry made the turning point clear. He would not support any further attempt to expand Meghan's role in the trust. His own existing connection would remain, but the wider challenge would end. William accepted without triumph. That private agreement changed everything the palace had been preparing for. But while the brothers had found a fragile understanding, the outside world had already caught the scent of conflict. What happened between them stayed restrained and painful. Beyond those walls, however, the story had already exploded. By morning, a private family conflict had become a global spectacle. The argument was no longer being discussed as a technical dispute over trust access. It was framed as something far more emotional. Meghan versus William, Harry caught between them, and Diana's memory once again pulled into the center of royal controversy. Yet one single public image captured the mood better than any commentary could. William hated how quickly the story had been flattened into a feud. British broadcasters presented the dispute as a battle over who had the moral right to protect Diana's private legacy, while palace staff refused to discuss protected trust matters in public. That refusal mattered, because trust affairs were private legal arrangements, not official royal policy, and the palace wanted to stop the conflict from becoming an institutional war. Harry understood the danger immediately. He feared that every new headline would turn public anger toward Meghan before anyone understood what had actually been decided. Meghan felt the coverage confirming her darkest expectation. She believed her motives would always be judged in the most hostile way possible, no matter how she explained them. Harry tried to steady the situation, but he knew the public argument had already moved beyond legal access. It had become a story about loyalty, Diana, and which branch of the family had the greater claim to her memory. That was precisely the kind of emotional contest he had wanted to avoid. Then one front page captured everything. Outside Kensington Palace, a small crowd gathered near the gates, while newspapers changed hands among onlookers. One edition showed William on one side, Meghan on the other, with a huge headline across the page: "Diana's legacy divides them again." The image was simple, brutal, and impossible to ignore. It turned a complicated family dispute into two opposing faces. William watched the television coverage for less than a minute before switching it off. He told an aide that Diana should never have become a headline in this argument. Harry, meanwhile, faced another shock when a broadcaster disclosed through a documented palace briefing that he had chosen not to pursue any expansion of Meghan's authority. The revelation immediately changed the tone of the coverage. Palace correspondents noticed something else. William's office refused to attack Harry personally, even when asked directly about the dispute. That restraint suggested what the public did not yet know. The brothers had reached some kind of private understanding. The storm began to cool, but the emotional damage remained. The headlines would fade. The trust would remain protected. But the real verdict was about what each person had lost and what two brothers had unexpectedly recovered. In the end, Meghan did not gain control of Diana's private trust. William did not emerge triumphant, because protecting his mother's legacy had forced him into another painful confrontation with his brother. Harry did not lose his connection to Diana, but he finally recognized that defending that connection did not require extending it to everyone around him. The battle ended not with victory, but with a boundary everyone was forced to understand. Meghan's request for independent involvement was formally rejected, and the challenge was not pursued again. Harry kept his existing beneficiary rights, meaning the limited rights already granted to him under the trust, but he accepted that those rights belonged to him and could not simply be passed to someone else. That distinction finally settled the legal side of the dispute. More importantly, it removed the excuse for the family to keep turning Diana's memory into another test of loyalty. William faced a harder truth. His fury had come from fear as much as anger. He believed the last private pieces of his mother's life could be pulled into a family conflict that had already consumed too much. Once Harry stepped back from expanding Meghan's role, the prince stopped treating his brother like an opponent. He understood that protecting Diana did not require punishing her younger son. Harry reached his own conclusion just as painfully. William's resistance had not been an attempt to erase him from their mother's legacy. The Duke finally saw that distinction clearly, and with it came a small measure of trust neither brother had expected to recover. Their relationship was not repaired in one conversation, but something dangerous had been stopped before it became permanent. William opened the door at the end of their private meeting without offering dramatic promises. Harry paused beside him, and the two brothers agreed on one thing without hesitation. Diana's private trust would never again become a weapon between them. No grand reconciliation followed. None was needed. The decision itself carried the weight. Meghan had lost the authority she wanted, but the deeper verdict reached beyond her request. Marital loyalty could not automatically become inherited family authority, and grief could not be used to erase boundaries created for protection. The monarchy emerged shaken, but clearer about one principle. Private family inheritance could not become another arena for royal rivalry. William later returned to the papers that had started the crisis. He did not reread Meghan's demand. He closed the folder, put it away, and left the matter behind. The demand was withdrawn. Harry's place was preserved. Diana's trust remained protected, and William's fury gave way to something quieter. The certainty that his mother's memory must never again become the price of another family war. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in next one.